Hey guys, welcome back. And now let's shortly talk about bishop against knight. And I want to do it in a way where I give you basics of where a bishop and where a knight is better. And then at the end, I will give you two positions where you need to find a move in sort of a practical example or an exercise you can solve in a strategic way. So if you want to test yourself already now, you can stop the video and think about the position at hand and think who is better and why. Now in this position, actually white is completely winning. Now we have, again, same count of pieces, each have one light minor piece and 3 pawns. But the difference of the minor pieces is huge. This bishop is attacking 2 pawns at the same time, and the knight is constricted to actually protect that pawn on a6. The knight cannot make any move, because if not, we just snatch the pawn. Beautiful. And the second problem is that this king also needs to stay on these two squares, h6 and g6, because h5 is hanging as well. So in this position, white can just march with the king towards this pawn on a6. We can just run over there, take the pawn on a6, and black has basically no way to defend. Because again, if the king moves too far away, we win one pawn. If the knight moves, we win another pawn. But we force the knight to move at some point, and we will queen the pawn. So this is a very easy illustrative position of where the bishop can use its full power to attack pawns on two different sides of the board, right? These pawns are so far away, and the knight cannot protect both of them. The knight needs to protect one, the king the other, and that's why we basically are a king up in a way, right? Because our bishop stops 2 pieces from moving, but only the bishop needs to stay. So we have a king that can just march wherever it wants for free. So that is where bishop is much stronger than a knight. Now let's go to the next position where the opposite is the case. In this position, again, 4 pawns, knight against bishop, and the knight is much better placed than black's bishop. And you might guess it, white is actually winning in this position. Why? Because this bishop has only one thing to do, and it is protect this pawn on h6. And one thing you can realize is that here the play is only on one side, right? We love if we have the knight to play only on one side, and if we have the bishop, we want to play on 2 different sides. Because this bishop would love to attack a pawn maybe on b4, or maybe on a3, right? Then we couldn't move much with our king just around. Imagine here being a white pawn and here being a black pawn. The position would be completely different, because then white's king needs to stand here, and the knight alone will not do a lot. Right? But when the play is only on one side, the bishop can be overwhelmed to work against this beautiful knight, and again, we can use the king to march in, and there will be Zugzwangs at some moment. For example, here, white wouldn't win if black wouldn't have to move, but black either has to give up this pawn by moving the bishop, or to let our king enter on e6 by moving the king and king e6. And thank you very much. We'll win this pawn. We'll win this pawn. We can win this pawn as well with the knight, and it's game over. So these are the two basic positions where you can understand when the knight is better in an endgame and where the bishop is better. Now let's go to the next position, which is a little exercise for you. Here. Now, you might realize that this position is extremely similar to what we've seen before, right? The knight is not on f5, bishop is not on f8, but the pawn structure is the same. Now my question to you is, you have to move the knight in this position. Which move are you preferring? Knight to e3 or knight to g3? You can stop the video and think about it, and then you will realize what the solution is when you go on with the video. Okay, so I hope you have all found that knight to g3 is the right way to continue here. We want to bring the knight to f5 and give black no chance to exchange their extremely horrible bishop for our knight. So if we play knight e3, that is actually a huge mistake. It's not a tactical mistake, but it's a positional mistake because black can trade and save the endgame. Because only with the king alone, we cannot enter because we have now opposition and it is a draw. But if we manage to keep the knight on the board, play knight to g3, in the next move we will play knight to f5, we will force the bishop to go to f8 again, and we will win in the same way as we saw before. We will enter with the king, there will be a Zugzwang, and we will win the game. So this is very important, right? This is immediately applying what you learned before. The knight in this specific position is much better than the bishop. So even if they each have 3 points in different positions, they will be worth a different amount. Here, it would be a huge blunder to let our beautiful knight trade against the bishop. And that's why we need to go knight to g3, knight to f5, and then bring our king into the game. Now let's go to the last position, which is again extremely similar to what you've seen already. In the position we talked about before, there was a pawn on a6, not on a7, and a pawn on h5, not on h6, right? That's the only difference. And now imagine you would be black. I can turn around the board and you are forced to move a pawn, okay? Somebody says you're not allowed to move your king, you're not allowed to move your knight, you need to move a pawn here. What move are you playing? Stop the video and think about it. Okay, so if you've realized that having the pawn on a square that is being attacked by the bishop is bad, we should exclude 2 moves immediately. We shouldn't play a6 or h5 or a6 because both of them here, the knight will never move again because we need to protect, right? If we play h5, the king will never move again because it needs to protect the h5 pawn. So we know it must be the f7 pawn. And again, in spirit of the strategical idea of having pawns not on the same color as the opponent's bishop in this endgame, we want to just play f6. Now, when we play f6, we control some squares and our king can be brought into the middle of the board to protect some entry squares, and we will be able to hold the draw in most games. Well, objectively, this is a drawn position. You can also play f5. f5 is less bad as h5 or a6, but again, it's not in the spirit of the position. Why should we put that pawn on a square where the bishop can attack it, right? So these were 2 themes where you learn something about knight and bishop, and then you can apply it in a position. And this can happen through a book. Sometimes, you know, there are these ideas generally explained, and then you need to solve an exercise, or in a course, wherever you want to study your basic positional ideas. Okay, guys, now I hope this made a lot of sense and you have some idea of how to practically improve positional ideas. And this is it for that section. You will see the best resources in the upcoming section. And then I want to challenge you to take one of those resources, just one, right? Don't overdo it. Just take one that fits your rating and start to learn some positional ideas and try to apply it in your game. As always, if you have any questions, just let me know in the Discord group, and I'm very happy to respond to those questions and have fun with studying positional chess.